Behind the Middle Belt killings is Caliphate ethnic cleansing. Behind Niger Delta agitation is Caliphate seizure of oil and gas. Behind Biafra and Odua agitation, Caliphate imposed unitary Nigeria. Behind the Caliphate itself is the rogue 1999 Constitution. Election is Caliphate's push to retain the 1999 fraud. Nigerians, say no to any further election in the country. Let's take down the 1999 Constitution and save our people and our land.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Join Nina's Clubhouse Town Hall section. We have an exciting discussion ahead of us tonight on Tinubu's economic experiments, Nigerians as guinea pigs. In the next 18 minutes, we will present a consolidated broadcast entitled Nigeria in Free Fall, Nina's Constitution Reset Emerges as Redemption Pathway, featuring 3 renowned Nigerian economic experts, a senator currently in office, and the profound postulation of Professor Reverend Father Anthony Akiwale about unitary Nigeria, a union at gunpoint. All of whom agreed that the only viable solution to Nigeria's economic woes, failures, and multifaceted dysfunction is a fundamental reconstruction or reset of the country's damaged constitutional foundation. The latest economic expert to join this consensus is Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Nigeria's former finance minister and current Director General of World Trade Organization, WTO. At the recent NBA 2024 annual conference, she emphasized the urgent need for a new social contract to reset Nigeria's survival, stability, and growth paradigm. The other experts who shared the same conviction are Professor Kingsley Moghalu, former Deputy Governor of Central Bank of Nigeria and former presidential candidate, Dr. Obi Ezekwesili, former minister and former vice president of the World Bank, Senator Sariki Dixon, immediate past governor of Bayelsa State. Together, these experts will present in this broadcast compelling case for an urgent and fundamental constitutional reconstruction. Ninas welcomes these 4 new experts to its campaign for constitution reset. Thank you for listening.
Of economic and social policy, and to set our country on a steady growth and development path, rather than an episodic growth path, I have become increasingly convinced that Nigeria needs a social contract. By this I mean a fundamental cross-party, cross-society agreement that certain things in the economy, in the country, in policy and in society are sacrosanct and shall not be touched or changed when administrations change. And the private sector and Nigeria's civil society, including influential actors like the NBA, have important roles to play in policing a social contract and holding the political class accountable. The idea of a social contract dates back at least a few centuries when philosophers such as Rousseau, Locke, and Hobbes spelled out the notion of a compact, formal or implicit, defining the rights and duties of rulers and the ruled. A more focused definition for our purposes comes from the former head of the London School of Economics and the former president of Columbia University, my former World Bank colleague, Minu Shafi. She describes the social contract as being about how we pool our resources to provide the public goods we agree are needed, and how we support those affected by adverse shocks. Her book, What We Owe Each Other, A New Social Contract for a Better Society, argues that in our fast-changing globalized economy, we need a new social contract to create a sense of security among people. What I'm calling for here is even more basic. I'm saying that all major actors in the governance of our country should agree on some basic parameters for security, macroeconomic and social stability, and the enabling environment for future dynamism and growth of our country. Once agreed, these parameters and policies should be institutionalized or enshrined in law, or even be made part of our constitution, not to be tampered with, except perhaps through a national referendum involving the entire country and society.
Everyone knows the threats this country is facing from an economy that is flatlining, even as it becomes obvious that Nigeria is broke. What's the problem? I mean, I'm going to put it just starkly. What's the problem with Nigeria's economy, and what's the best way to fix it?
The problem with Nigeria's economy is that we do not understand how to fix it, and we have made some very important mistakes. See, any prosperous economy operates at 4 levels. The first level is the philosophical level. That is to say, what is the organizing vision and philosophy of any country? And from there, what is the economic philosophy that drives the country's economy? The second level is the level of institutions. And this is the level of the political economy, the interaction between institutions and markets. The third level, which is where we tend to focus, skipping the first 2 levels, is the macroeconomy. And there you're talking about inflation, which is monetary policy. You're talking about taxation, which is fiscal policy and debt management and things like that. And the fourth level is the level of human development. That is to say, the basics of life. You know, longevity. Do people have good health care? Do they have education? The basics of life, you know. We tend to focus a lot on the macroeconomy and we ignore human development. And so you find poverty increasing while we're very concerned with GDP growth rates. But we are not concerned with GDP per capita, which has flatlined and remained the same for more than 20 to 30 years now at about $2,000, which is just unbelievable. So, to fix the Nigerian economy, we must go back to the fundamentals. The Nigerian nation needs to be reinvented. There is no nation. We have a country, but we don't have a nation. We need to create an inclusive philosophical foundation that we can all agree on. That this is what it means to be a Nigerian. This is what we believe in. This is where we're going. And we agreed on who we are in this construct called Nigeria, what our rights are and what our obligations are. That conversation is not happening. Every government in this country avoids the matter of a fundamental constitutional restructuring of Nigeria. And you find that we're operating on a constitution that many people feel left out of. So, therefore, this shapes the politics, because the politics is not a politics of a united vision. It's a politics of contending disparate forces, you know, ethnic, religious, and each person that grabs power represents part of the whole, but not the whole. And you know what then happens is that he or she, well, he so far, they acquire all the advantages of power. Their cronies become rich and get all the appointments, and when their term is over, another people will come and do exactly the same thing. So it's just 1979 Constitution, right? Was a military version of what we should be guided by as a people. And that constitution gives way ultimately to the 1999 constitution, another military constitution. And so
there was the 89 constitution, but it didn't actually take effect.
The 99 is constitution is the central thing now. Now, when you think in terms of the constitutionalism and the constitutional process, there is so much attention that is given to the substance, that is what you say about it contains, because it's the document that contains these rules and practices. But even much more attention is given to process.
The legitimacy of the state is often dependent on the process that emerges, the structures and the processes and the procedures of the state. When you look at the constitutional processes, you would find that there's an alienation of the larger bulk of the Nigerian people for whom the Constitution should be the practice of life as citizens.
But is it going to make any difference if you change the current one? I mean, a lot of people will still remain, alienated from it, given the fact that there's poverty, crushing poverty, there's illiteracy.
I think you're missing it.
And those are elements that would bring them closer to the concept of the
concept. But you're missing a step there. So why is it that those who argue on the necessity for this country to have a conversation that is people-centered and which then leads to agreements on what really are shared values? People who are arguing for that are people who are sensibly looking at what has happened to our society. One critical factor that enables development is what we call social capital, social cohesion. We lack it. It's depleted. You can't do much in rallying your people toward development without that. Another thing that's important is your shared values. People constantly say, because they have heard people say it, so they say it's institutions that matter, not the human beings. Oh, that's a very sound word.
But the institutions are made up of humans.
Okay? So we do know that the simple definition of institution is the way the people do their things. Have we agreed how we do our things in Nigeria in ways that really bind us to certain sets of shared values that if anyone negated it, it wouldn't matter who they are. And then the matter of, hey, we've got different definitions. I am a woman, Christian, Igbo, just name all kinds of other affinities that I have. Yet, I am Nigerian. So being able to come to the place where a set of things enable us define that common identity. Now, you know what all of that is? That's part of the process, because the process of constitution making is to enable the citizen look at the document and see themselves in it. And that sense of ownership of how the state operates and how the people relate and interact and how the institutions and the systems work. That ownership is the most significant thing that begins to move people from country to nation. Now, nation formations are very important ingredients that succeed in determining the level of aspiration that the people have. Today's Nigeria, what would you say is our aspiration? If you asked a Nigerian and you said to them, why does Nigeria exist? Do you think we have had that conversation? We haven't. So what has happened is that even the constitutional process has always been the pastime of the in quote, the political elite of our society. So you've got a very insignificant percentage of Nigerians who have their Rolodex of names. And those names can come together at any point in time and be chosen as the wise and often wise men, who then decide what should be in the Constitution. When you have that, especially in a world that is increasingly showing clearly that it belongs to the young. When you look at the mean age of the continent today, it's about 18.2 years. So when you have that, and yet you're holding them down to systems and contexts
that are not reflecting the very important and significant issues that they want to be able to solve. So, for example, two critical things that Nigerians, the dominant young people in Nigeria, would want to see Nigeria be about is a productive country and a competitive.
You rightly observed in your introduction, some of us, and I inclusive, are of the view, firstly, that this country needs a people's constitution, a constitution that emanates from the people, a constitution that will lay the groundwork for unity, because you see, the constitutional foundation, the superstructure, is what determines even the economics, structure that will be built on it, the political systems that will be built on it, the legal system, and then dealing with the overriding issue of integration and cohesion in this country. We believe that the existing constitution is not a people's constitution. It didn't emanate from the people. The 1999 constitution has been severally amended. Started as a decree of the military government. 1990. In fact, it was so bad that in 1998-99, when this democratic dispensation came in, even the political players, and I was a state chairman at that level, didn't even have an idea of what the constitution looked like. I mean, it was that bad. The constitution was promulgated to take effect from when President Obasanjo, who was elected president, took his oath of office. And that was when the constitution, everybody read it and then saw what it looked like.
So basically, people were kept in the dark.
Everybody was kept in the dark.
That's extraordinary.
So a number of people have forgotten that, unfortunately, that I'm not sure even President Obasanjo, as well as the 36 state governors in 1998, who stood elections under provisions that were made by a military decree, the transition decree, didn't even know the nation extent of the powers that they were going to have and the issues. Yes, a lot of Nigerians have lost sight of that. In other words, what we call as the constitution today was actually a military decree. So the people never really played any role in the making of what we now call the 1999 Constitution. Actually, a lot of us have the view that it is a fraudulent document, and it can't fall.
To begin by resolving a conceptual crisis. What do I mean by a conceptual crisis? Quite often when we speak about Nigeria, we collapse the distinction between country, state, and nation. We tend to think that the three mean the same. We tend to think the three are synonyms. A country is a territory. From the Latin contra terra, the land that lies ahead of you. A country is a territory. It is not necessarily a nation. A nation is an association of peoples, and I use that word in the plural deliberately because of diversity. A nation is an association of peoples who identify their shared core values. And on the basis of their shared core values, they give themselves a constitution which will now establish institutions that make up the state. What we have in Nigeria and in most African countries is a confusion where we think the nation is the state. The nation is reduced to the state. We have a country quite all right by the fact that we live within a territory, even if that territory is not secure, as we all know. But we don't have a nation. We have institutions that make up the state. We collapse the nation into the state. If you look at our constitution, section 2 of the current constitution, and you don't find this in the 1963 constitution, it ascribes sovereignty not to the people but to the state. That is dangerous. That means the state has the last say on any question. That means the state is more powerful than the citizen. That is a recipe for impunity. Because as we all know, the state is the head of state, or the governor, or whoever represents them. Whatever they say, we all have to comply, whether they're right or wrong. So we don't have a democracy in the true sense of the word.
Join me in welcoming our NINA's spokesperson, Mr. Tony Nadi, who will enlighten us on Tinubu's economic experiments, Nigerians as guinea pigs. Sir, please, you have the floor. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and welcome everybody. What is going on in Nigeria right now is something of an extraordinary emergency if people were to understand both the fact that it's going on at all and how it might affect them. It's already affecting them, but it can only get worse, and it can be something that will wipe out a whole number of people. It can be something that will turn a whole number of destinies to the negative. While we talk about guinea pig, for 230 million people who thought they were in a country that was a democracy, who thought elections would bring them, another leadership that could do better than the previous leaderships, and who, having gone to that election, suddenly found themselves in a kind of a spin, everything getting worse and worse. They are there waiting for relief that will come from what the people that emerged from the election, I don't want to say the people they voted for, will do. And what Ninas has set in motion all the while, what Ninas is doing even now, relates with arresting that terrible situation that affects millions and millions and millions of the entire country, and by extension, the fate of the black man, wherever he is, whether he's in the continent of Africa or he's in the diaspora, including those who found themselves in the Americas. It is not Benin Republic that will turn their situation around, on the continent. It's not Cameroon. It's not Guinea. It's not any of all these countries. South Africa, that will have been some kind of starting point, is again occupied by the West, the Boers. Forget all the pretenses. And so, what we are doing is to open the eyes of our people to what is going on and to try to guide our people to what they can do before it becomes too late. Now, the voices you heard in the audio, it was video, but because of the platform we're using for this meeting, it came out as audio. The voices you heard were those of people who have tried to manage Nigeria at the pinnacle of the economic team. The first was Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, who was a two-time finance minister, coordinating minister for economy in the second coming, and who, having been at the World Bank before coming to Nigeria, is today the Director General of the World Trade Organization, WTO. If anybody was therefore looking for somebody who not only has knowledge of economics, but one who has a first-hand knowledge of the Nigerian economy, because she had been coordinating minister for the economy, like the prime minister in Jonathan's tenure. And so here is this expert who had been here with global experience when Obasanjo was president, managing the finance and the economy, coming back again on the same portfolio of finance with an expanded responsibility over the economy. So if anybody will know anything that the Nigerian economy is suffering from, it has to be Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala. And she comes back to tell us now that they built up the economy. Then in no time, it went all the way down. Then they built again. As she came back, in no time, it began to spin downwards. And so she has now become persuaded. Yes, she said she was becoming increasingly persuaded, but we can help her land properly. That she is now persuaded, and look at the venue where she was speaking, at the Bar National Conference, annual conference of Bar Association, at plenary. The government was there in all its arms. The presidency, the head of the judiciary, of course, the head of the National Assembly is a lawyer that attends. So the entire country was there. And she was telling them that everything is gone bad except Nigeria makes a new social contract. If you pick up the dictionary now to check out the meaning of social contract, you will see that it simply means constitution, the rules of cohabitation in a union such as ours. And so that's Ngozi Okonjo there, having tried everything else to get Nigeria standing, to realize its potentials, its economic potentials, amongst other potentials. But Nigeria failing on all fronts. Nigeria becoming the poverty capital of the world, despite this humongous endowment, human and material. You go from her to the next speaker, which happened to be Professor Kingsley Moghalu. Kingsley Moghalu was at the United Nations on the economic desk, and he was involved in, some efforts that were successful in fixing countries that were broken economically when the UN had to intervene because of the human, suffering that were coming from those economic failures. So he has also had first-hand experience in the Nigeria economy, where he was later invited to be deputy governor at the central bank, incidentally, in the period coinciding with when Ngozi Okonjo was there. So they have been at the pinnacle of trying to manage the Nigerian economy. Looking back at what has happened, when this current administration came, because we're not talking about a Tinubu that emerged, where people were looking for a change of leadership instead of a change of the constitution that was responsible for all the problems. So the product of that election of 2023, right as it began, everything, like tumbled downwards. The interview from where this clip was cut was where Arise TV had invited Kingsley to say, look, you should know better than most people on what to do. Now we have an emergency now. What do we do? The economy is in free fall. And then Kingsley says, look, the problem is that we are building on an untenable constitutional foundation, and that the economy will not get off the ground or cease to be in free fall except Nigeria reworks its constitutional basis. He described it as a philosophical foundation, but he goes on to use the word constitutional reconstruction. And so, second witness to the fact that the problems of Nigeria as it is, that has now resulted in what we are seeing as free fall, and it goes all the way to the security we see. Bandits now making broadcasts, seizing military equipment and generally sweeping forward to their destination, their objectives. We come from Kingsley Moghalu. And by the way, remember he had contested election to be president of Nigeria since after he left the central bank. And so credit must go to Ninas for bringing him to that realization, because if he knew this, he wouldn't have gone trying to be president under the constitution that was responsible for what was happening to Nigeria. You may have heard before that he had been engaged. He has all the documents, beginning with a constitutional force majeure, that detailed what the problem was, what the solution could be, how the solution could be applied, when, and who will have to do what. The 5-point proposition contained in that force majeure. He didn't pay attention. He didn't think that was the case. But if today he's saying we go nowhere except we fix the constitution, I tell you, it will be foolish not to listen to him, because he's been on the driving seat on that matter, especially considering the portfolio he had in that central bank. He was the man on that compartment of task that should have arrested the situation long time ago. But for that constitution, we go from there to Obi Ezekwesili. Again, Vice President, World Bank, two-time minister, with a lot to show for what they were able to do in the period that brought Nigeria to be the biggest economy in Africa at the time, topping $500 billion. Today, we are struggling to get to half of that today. That is how far we have slumped. What is the problem? And when we're talking about these figures, when we're talking about Nigeria that is in free fall, we are talking about the individuals who are now hungry, who have been, dislocated from everything they thought they already had settled for them. Everybody is struggling, just trying to survive, even the ones who were comfortable before now. And so it's not fancy talk to say that Nigeria has become the economic, the poverty capital of the world. It is because we now have more in terms of absolute numbers than any other country of people who are living below the poverty line. Many now far below the dollar a day, because if you have a family of 5 or 6, let's say a family of 6, $1 a day will be $6. Convert $6 for what we have now, you find close to 10,000 naira. If the family had 10,000 naira and above, that means that family is living on the average, that's it. If the family, if that family has 10,000 naira to spend every day on their needs, it means that that family is living on $1 a day, because it is 1 times 6 multiplied by what your naira has become at over 1.6 today. And so when you have millions and millions of people, $1 a day is already below their nose, already below water everywhere you look, every side you look. Because not only food they're going to eat, they're going to have to pay rent, and the children have to pay for school and all kinds of things, healthcare, everything. And so we see the tragedy in the midst of all these endowments for the citizens of that country that should have been, among the top countries in terms of people living well, just by sheer endowment, human and material. Name whatever it is, we have it more than other people. But why are we where we are? You go from Obiezekwe, because again, Obiezekwe says, she says, it is the Constitution. It is not just what is written, the process of defining our shared vision. What is that thing that we hold sacrosanct, all of us, that will then become basis of our economy, that will become basis of everybody putting in their best, that will become basis of everybody frowning at those who might want to ruin the community drinking well. That's the well of drinking water. Because that's what the treasury looks like. That's what the trust of power. The when you put people in power, you give them the right of the power of life and death over these 230 million people, for how they feed, for how they get healthcare, for how they get security, for how everything they have to do, the government can make or mar. And so that constitutional arrangement, which is basis of an economy, of a society that is stable, of opportunities that could go around, but everything being upside down, we see corruption, we see impunity, we see failure on all sides. Just another example of one who have been in the saddle in government in Nigeria with global experience coming to tell us we cannot fix this thing until we get the people of Nigeria to sit down and agree on what they have to do. Again, constitution. We come to Siriake this thing, immediate past governor of Bayelsa State, now sitting in the Senate. He was a founding member of PDP in 1998. He told the story of how the constitution came. He says a fraud. He says all the institutions that are failing. We look at the constitution for how they got there. He confirmed that nobody knew how they came other than Yadudu that was working in the dark with Salam Abaka. He confirmed that they took oath of office, the ones who had to take the oath in 1999 before they saw the document. What did they now find inside the document? This madness that has ruined the lives of many. What does he recommend? Constitution has to be reworked. And then we come to the headmaster of them all, Professor Anthony Akinwale, who was Vice Chancellor of the Dominican University in Ibadan. It's the Catholic University. He broke it all down to saying that what we have now is a union at gunpoint. What is our shared, what are those shared core values? That is, what are those things we agreed as basis of our union, upon which we can then construct our democracy, upon which we can construct our economy? Nothing, because there was no discussion. So he says, often people ask, what do we then do? He says, if you're on the right to move forward, and you hear it all the time, how do we move Nigeria forward? Let's move Nigeria forward. He says, if you are on going in the wrong direction, you cannot be talking about going forward. you have to make a U-turn. What is the U-turn that has to be made by Nigeria at this time? It is, and I say it without equivocation, it is the constitutional reconstruction of Nigeria. And if you ask me how, the NINA's constitutional force majeure, the 5-point proposition of that constitutional force majeure, tells Nigeria and Nigerians, and whoever else may care about what could happen to Nigeria and Nigerians, what the problem is with precision. And that's why we say in our first proposition, we say the government must now acknowledge. All these people, we heard their voices, they've now acknowledged. Obasanjo that processed the document in 1979 for them and revived it in 1999, went to Port Harcourt the other time to acknowledge that it is the constitution that is the problem. And there's no other way to go than for the owners of the sovereignties put together here to go and sit down to rework their union agreement so that they can defend it and build on it. Are we to forget about Emeka Anyoko that went to Tinubu the other day to say, look, the document we are building on is the reason the place is failing? Can we leave what we were doing wrong and go to fixing it? Much as the modalities he was proposing is like building a house from the roof, but at least he has come to that point of acknowledgement that that constitution is the problem and that the country will go nowhere except that problem is fixed. And so from that item 1 of our proposition, which relates to acknowledgement, everybody else has acknowledged. Even the National Assembly of Benjamin Kalu that tried to go to write another document. Is that another acknowledgement of the fact that what we have it cannot hold? When they got to Lisabon to try to come to direct them, is that not another open acknowledgement? Because Tinubu was sitting there, Akpabio was there, both of them with a note. And Olisa was telling them how to go and write the other document. They were almost getting started on it, which was what Benjamin was boasting about, that they, in 24 months, they will write another one and throw at us. Of course, we shut down, we simply told them they didn't know what they were talking about. Because they don't seem to understand the meaning of constitution. With all the PhDs and the senior advocateship and professorship, we come down to the second proposition of solution to that problem that have been identified clearly by NINAS: wholesale decommissioning. No other way. Otherwise, anything you build on a rickety foundation will collapse on you. Is that a matter for debate with all these confessions and acknowledgements from people who have been inside government at that topmost level, who have tried everything economic? From there, number 3, let us stop the journey to any further election so that we can go and deal with the matter right away. If you know this is the problem and this is the solution, are you going to say, let's leave it for another season? Let us be 8 years in power before we begin to talk about it. When people are dying on account of that constitution that is upside down, because that is what is responsible for the economy that is in free fall. You go to number 4 of, okay, we stop the journey to election. We go to transition. What are we doing in that transition? To rework the relationships in 2 stages. Identify the owners of the sovereignty that have been, grouped here against their will all this while, locked down by the constitution that tied their hands to the back and seized their economic assets, pointing guns at them, which Akinwale said is union at gunpoint. It is in that item 4 that NINAS, places on the table a clear mechanism for solving the problem. Nobody else, government or all the groups, none else has that clarity on the subject and practical process, step by step. Then item 5 is the announcement that has to be made to commence the doing of what's been listed. And that's where the public comes in. That's where the people who are crying and dying now whether they are being slaughtered in the Middle Belt, or their economic assets are being hijacked in the Niger Delta, or their ports are being, marauded by. The country is not working. Nigerians are fleeing in all directions. Young people are crossing the desert with their legs and drowning the sea, Mediterranean Sea. Why will the rest of the 230 million people not insist that we stop the voyage to death and solve this problem? Which is what leaders have been trying to get them to see. And so we come back to the question of what is the government of the day doing? Ninas has come to the conclusion that those who have captured the state, the ones who came through the brigandage they describe as election in 2023, are conducting experiments in which the Nigerians have become the guinea pigs, economic experiments that are failing to the seeing of everybody. The only people who are not complaining are the ones sharing the monies that should have been going into the lives of the people to bring life back to them. Everybody else can see. But the governors who have to go to get 20 and 30 billion every month cannot see. The members of the National Assembly that take humongous amounts every month and allot just any figure they choose, they can take for any purpose, they are not seeing. Their hangers on and the commissioners in the states and the ministers in the cabinet in Abuja and all kinds of MDAs, that's agencies of government. You can see the NNPC that will take billions and billions of dollars, not producing any 1 liter of petrol. And you look again to the everything has failed everywhere. And when we talk about guinea pig and economic experiment, when on the 29th of May in 2023, Bola Tinubu announced that subsidy had been withdrawn like a drunken sailor. What was the plan for how to make available that product, which is at the base of all the other things? Because if you can't move the people around, electricity was not there all the while. And so people rely on petrol and diesel to run their businesses in terms of generating electricity. You have no public transport arrangement at all. So they rely on petrol to move and diesel to move around at all, whether they were riding in vehicles or tricycles or motorcycles. So the moment you touch that petrol for whatever price they have to pay, it immediately affects everything, including prices of food. We have the question of security lurking in the background, in which farmers could no longer go to their farms. And so there's no production going on for food. The little they get know how to come to town with it. And then you say you remove a subsidy. How did we get to the question of subsidy? Refineries are on the exclusive list. And so there's no production, no processing of products here. You have to import. And if you say you are no longer going to pay for the difference between how much you have to pay abroad to buy in dollars the product that it has to be sold at the pumps in naira, it is the cost of the inefficiency. Everything they cost subsidy is the cost imposed on all of us by the madness of the unitary constitution in the first instance, and the madness of keeping it that way, such that these 230 million people have to rely on products that are imported. How much of it can you pay for? Because you collect the money in naira at the pumps, the next product has to come, you pay in dollar. Look at the shipping, quite apart from the cost, the absolute cost. Look at the shipping back and forth. And so it becomes something that they each time try to pass to the populace to pay for. And then he comes without any arrangement whatsoever. He says, okay, it's gone. All of you go and pay some more. In less than 48 hours, we went from less than 200 to close to 400 and something. In another 2 weeks, it has gone to 600. Just like that. And today we're discussing 1,000. Now that naira that you have to use to go to buy this quantum of products for the entire populace, because we're not talking about millions and millions of liters that have to be consumed every day. The naira, the pressure on the naira, the worst point of pressure on the naira is the fact that you have to take so much of it to buy this product in dollar every day. Before you knew it, another policy was thrown up, naira to be thrown into open market to go and compete with all the other currencies to find its own level. No production is going on. So for food, you are still importing because you are not producing. For petrol, you are still importing, you are not producing. And everything was based on the false premises that the Dangote refinery, that they had taken all the money from the treasury to support into you confiscate, because those who want to rejoice may go rejoicing, but there are owners. There are owners to that crude. Nigeria confiscated the ownership of that crude in the name of a federal government that does not exist. Our federation collapsed in 1966. The day Murtala Mohammed and his co-criminals began to kill their commander-in-chief and their colleagues in service from the east, Nigeria died. The carcass was hijacked by the caliphate. Now masquerading as federal government, having added to itself renegade elements from other parts of Nigeria. They operating as federal government in a situation where our federation had collapsed. So that unitary monster that emerged put an exclusive list in which they become the owners of all the major economic assets, including oil and gas. So you already took the oil and gas from the owners. You use that same constitution to confiscate the right to refine, so that even if I want to buy and refine today, I'm not able to, because you are not going to license me. You give that crude to your Dangote to refine for me in monopoly. You run down the 4 refineries that money from the treasury was used to build over the years. None of them have produced anything. And you want to sell that Dangote project as our project. If we do not define the we the people in that preamble to the 1999 Constitution, if we do not define that we the people to everybody's satisfaction, everything you say and use the word our, like you say our country, there's a question mark, because I will then ask you and who. Everything you say, our refinery, our military, our economy, our democracy, until we define that we, the people, you are talking to yourself. And so, all of what we suffer are flowing from that foundational anomaly, that constitutional anomaly. And Tinubu goes in the assumption that the refinery they commissioned 2 times in 2023, in the first quarter of 2023, will already be producing all of what we need. That was the basis of throwing away. They didn't make provision in their budget. They budgeted for every other thing. And they say, oh, there will be petrol. There was no petrol. And they had to go back to buying. They couldn't tell us the truth about what they were paying in the difference that had arisen. And so you were now burning this candle on 2 sides, because in floating the naira too, at a time there's no production to back up naira, whether for petroleum products or for even food that was being imported on account of lack of production. Both things flowing back to the constitution that make it impossible. the one of security that rendered farming impossible, and the one of exclusive list, which has refineries that made processing of crude impossible. So that constitution is responsible for the two. The naira began to lose value because they had to go borrowing more and more and more to support the naira, the dollar they borrow from outside. And what are they using these monies for? Quite apart from supporting the naira, we have 812 governments imposed on us by that constitution we didn't make. At the time Nigeria was working, it was 5 governments, 4 regional governments, and 1 federal government. 4 regions were federating. And they provided more governance. We are still citing that era as the golden era of Nigeria, where everybody was doing their best. The regions, and we have been plunging downwards and downwards since that time. And then people who ought to know now carrying on as if they don't know anymore. Because if anybody should know anything about these things we have been discussing across the last almost 1 hour, it must be Bola Tinubu that was in Nadeko. What was the Nadeko campaign? How did Nadeko even come to be? The military conducted the election, cancelled the election on their friend, Moshood Abiola. Abiola goes away for 1 year, comes back, and begins to fight. Begin to say he wants his mandate. He couldn't afford it alone. The generals, some of whom are retired, got together to say, Moshood, if we were to rally round in this matter, to recover this mandate from our colleague, Ibrahim Bangida and his Abacha co-traveler, what are you willing to address the source of these are problems that have been here since 1979, practically 1967, but it was in 1979 that they codified it in the manner that became constitution, other than the decrees by which they were governing. Abiola committed to that. Abiola said to them, I will not govern for 1 day with that constitution, because they were all privy to what went wrong. They were all involved when Murtala Mohammed in 1975 commissioned the drafting of a unitary constitution, which Ben Wabeze eventually confessed fully to. But I'm sure all of us here have seen the clip of the inauguration of the Rotimi Williams and Ben Wabeze committee in November of 1975 for the drafting of the constitution that was processed as 1979 constitution, without any form of discussion by anybody. The Constituent Assembly of 1977, again, wasn't the kind of thing you needed to get back to the sovereignties discussing, that is, the constituent components of Nigeria in exercise of their sovereignty, discussing their union. None of those things were done. And so Abiola, that was a player, he wasn't a casual player, he was a major player in the arena. So he knew exactly what went wrong. That was why he committed to not governing for 1 day with that constitution of unitarism that Murtala Mohammed imposed. Of course, Obasanjo did the finishing. And that was what became Nadeko. Therefore, if Abiola did not make the journey, he would have gone home, if not for that one item. That was the one reason the caliphate would not let him go, because he had abandoned the collective pathway of unitarism. They feared that if he got to government house, that would be the end of their reign. If Abiola lost his life in that campaign, will anybody who is aware of that, who is privy to that, who was part of Nadeko, then come to try to govern Nigeria with that unitary constitution? Would the blood of Abiola not be on the head of such people? And Bola Tinubu was a principal member of that campaign. He became governor in Lagos, riding on that wave. So why will it become something that needs to be marketed again to him when he became governor? And we tried to carry on as best as we could when Obasanjo would not listen for the first 4 years. And I'm not none of these things I've said across the last 10 minutes concerning what Abiola committed to, what became Nadeko, and how Bola Tinubu, who was from that fold, stepping into governorship of Lagos. We carried on when Obasanjo refused to summon Pronaco to say, let the nationalities come and discuss among themselves. When we are done, the government will be told where we want to go with our union, because our sovereignty remains our sovereignty. We never gave it to anybody. Absalom Abeka didn't have the right to make constitution and impose on all of us. Decree number 24. Obasanjo went on national broadcast to say it will be treason if we insisted. When he saw that he wasn't getting anywhere with that, he then called the parallel conference that happened in 2005. In all of that time, because Bola Tinubu still stood with the initiative to rework the constitution, he facilitated for Enohoro, who was chairing co-convener, the Pronaco. And so that became the basis of Obasanjo falling out with him, seizing council funds, accusing him of all kinds of things. How then could those who stood with him in that difficult period to find ways and means of overcoming Obasanjo's brigandage, including the one speaking to you now? Oshibajo was Attorney General. Fashola was his Chief of Staff after Lai Mohammed. At what point did they all forget what the issues were? That they are trying to govern Nigeria. They are trying to build an economy, citing animal farm statistics for us every day. Anywhere you tune the TV, you see them appointing all kinds of unemployable people to come and manage the lives of this number of people. And so the assumption that production will be, that local production of petroleum products will take the place of imports, fell flat. It didn't come through. We're just hearing today, September 3, that Dangote is now getting ready, and he says it will be sold in monopoly to NNPC that will then fix the price. They're already talking at prices above 1,000. I'll be surprised if, unless something dramatic happens, I'll be surprised if the price will settle at anything less than 1,200. It could go all the way to 1,005 because the Naira is still under severe pressure. The 812 governments that Nigeria, the lunatic, is paying to finance every month, the governors will take the money from the allocation. The first thing they do is to go, once they pay our salary, the next thing, the bulk of the money, they go and mop up every dollar they can find at any price. So the Naira is, under severe pressure from these two fronts, having to pay for imported petroleum products and having to pay in terms of being mopped up by the governors and the local government chairmen, because they are not accountable to anybody for anything. All the monies just end up with them, and they go and change it to dollar and head out to Europe and America, going to hold their birthday parties in Dubai. Everybody in his private jet, everybody in his own convoy. 812 governments and people with education in that space are not asking, how did we come about having to finance this level of profligacy? It was by decree that the local governments were smuggled into the constitution. In a federation, local government has no business being listed. How much more being financed? Even 5%. So they poured all of those in. How did we come about 36 states? Decree. It wasn't your decision or my decision. And our signature is there, sitting in the preamble to that constitution, by which is still being done today. Where are these people drawing power from? If all of us reject that constitution on account of the fraudulence of its origin, where are they drawing power from today to govern? Where are they drawing power and authority to sell crude oil and share the money every month in the name of governing us? Why can't the victims of this madness stand up and throw off that yoke with everything Ninas has placed on the table? And so they have become the guinea pig that Tinubu and his band are trying all kinds of economic theories, and it's not working. Everybody can see that it's not working. He has been told by everybody. But those victims whom we told not to go to 2023 election under that constitution, who didn't listen to us? Some of them were obedient. Oh, Peter will come and fix everything. Even if Peter had become president, for the Peter Obi that says the constitution is not the problem, what was the hope that he will come in and now begin to address the source of the problem? The reason we're beaming this satellite on this issue in this detail is that the people who are waiting for anything to change in the things that are wrong with that have gone wrong to the seeing of everybody in Nigeria, the ones who are the victims of that harrowing economic crunch, that hardship, that hunger, the insecurity flowing along with it, be informed. Let it be known to you that your situation will only get worse. If you thought you were hungry now, wait until the fuel goes to 112 to 15. It's still 600 now and 700, and you think you are hungry. Hunger has not come. What is the solution? Nigeria is bleeding from all sides. The first aid that Nigeria needs now is to make the kind of announcement that South Africa made in 1990, to make a U-turn from a constitution of apartheid that was not working for the people. If that first aid is not applied, if Nigeria does not make a U-turn from its unitary constitution, you can take it to the bank that Nigeria as one political union will go up in smoke with catastrophic consequences in terms of human collateral damage amongst these 230 million people. If 10 people had died already from the recklessness of this government, you can be sure that you could be counting hundreds that will die. Unless this emergency treatment, Nigeria must be moved into the emergency treatment it requires. And what is that emergency treatment? An announcement must be made to say that this constitution is the problem, to commit to decommissioning it, to suspend the talk of any further election so that it can be done immediately, to invite the owners of the sovereignties that have been detained here since 1914 into the two-stage procedure for solving the matter. But the victims of the Nigeria, the monster of now, must make that demand. The 5-point proposition of Ninas is the plug and play, ready to use. But if they do not have any other solution of their own, and they are refusing to do the little that Ninas asked them to do, what is that little? To insist that they will not proceed to another election under this constitution, because that will immediately choke out the oxygen from that constitution and compel that transitioning. That is the only thing that has the capacity to save all of those who are dying now, all of those who are going to die if we don't solve this problem in the months ahead. They must insist now that those in Abuja and the governors that go to join them every month end cannot continue to draw power from that constitution that is a fraud, that is directly responsible for these calamities, that is also directly enabling the corruption we see, the impunity we see, and the general failure of everything we see, infrastructural decay we see, insecurity we see. I would think it's a fairly straightforward situation. And for those who have been advertising, oh, brand new constitution for Nigeria, Emeka Anyoko and co. A federation does not operate one constitution. That was how Nigeria got into this ditch. The federating constitutions were toppled, and the unitary one constitution was then imposed, which is the unitary constitution we're talking about. The solution to the situation is not a new constitution for Nigeria. The solution is fresh constitutional arrangements, because that's why Nina say constitutional reconstruction of Nigeria. That's why Nina say constitutional reset. What does that mean? Because many do not understand that constitution making is a much wider process than constitution drafting. If you go to constitution draftings, yeah, that's if, like Emeka Anyoko suggested, if you just go and write another constitution, you have not solved the problem. Constitution drafting is only a component of constitution making. For a federation like Nigeria, especially in the distress it is now, what is the meaning of constitution making? You have to identify and delineate the prospective federating units. The Yoruba as the owners of their land and their sovereignty. The Ijaw as the owners of their land and their sovereignty. The Edo as the owners of their land and their sovereignty. The Igbo as the owners of their land and sovereignty. All across to the Jukun and the Hausa. You must identify them and delineate them in the formations they can federate. That's the first step if we want to solve this problem. Then the second is where they sit down as units that want to federate to negotiate and agree on the terms of federating. First, to agree to federate and then to negotiate every detail of the terms of federating, because that's where you now see the formations of their choice, not Imo State and Abia State and geopolitical zone, the structure of the federation. Structure of the federation. How many units, how many tiers? Then the system. Is it presidential? Is it parliamentary? It is in that second compartment of action that all of those things will be distilled. Everything now, everything that will be written into the constitution will be something they had negotiated and settled in agreement. It is therefore in the third compartment, after they had agreed on all things, that you bring a constitution drafting committee or constituent assembly to codify, reduce into writing what this agreement, is. That is the constitution drafting component of that process. And when you've drafted and they are scrutinized, they are happy with what they see, you will then take it to ratification so that it can receive life by the imprimatur and seal of the people of Nigeria, and that is by referendum. You can see there are 4 distinct stages. In the first stage, identify those who will federate. Not like 1914 when the British didn't talk to anybody. Not like 1959 when they were talking to the politicians they are trained. Not like everything we have seen since 1967 to 79 to 99 when they didn't talk to anybody. And so by decree, they were creating Oyo State, Zamfara State, everybody state. They poured local government into the fray. And the whole thing became a mad house. And people are dying. And so, in demanding a solution that can work, the peoples of Nigeria have been invited by NINAS today to say, we can't proceed with this constitution as basis of union. We can't proceed to another election on the basis of this constitution, because the moment you say that, that constitution will cease, they will have to go to transition. The first casualty, the immediate casualty will be that constitution. And so the only way to proceed will be to get into a transition. And the only business to be done in that transition will be to sort out these things. You can see we have already worked out everything that will settle this matter from beginning to the end. And so we will immediately dismantle these 812 units, these 812 governments. It can come down to 5 or 6 or 11 or 9 or 8, whatever be the other number. And there will be no mention of local government areas. You don't need more than 10%. You do not need more than 10% of all the money being spent today, which all the money Nigeria is earning is no longer able to pay, and therefore they are borrowing from in foreign loans to pay for the running the bureaucracy generated by this 812 government. That's all they are doing with the money they are borrowing, amortizing some of them into 40 years, pledging crude oil and gas as they borrow. Shell is producing today. Egypt is producing. Everybody is producing. But the production is mortgaged. Buhari collected the monies up front. And so there's no money that can come into the economy from what they are producing today. And you can see the folk tales, the turning story from NNPC every day. The crude oil they couldn't find to give to Dangote was in part because all the production pledged. Shell has no problem. Mobil has no problem. The government, the Nigeria's share of that production is what they pledged. So Shell will continue to produce and sell. And as they are selling, the portion that should have been the money coming to Nigeria is going to the people that Buhari took money from. Tinubu too continued in that arrangement. You saw the one that they did when Naira was falling on them and they were borrowing. You go and borrow some kind of $3 million or the $2.5 million that will pay $30 billion by the time it's due. So it's just a matter of responsibility for all of this, because sovereignty belongs to you, from whom government will derive all its powers and authority through this constitution. Since we have not made any constitution and we have worked out step by step what the people could do, not whether the government wants it or not that they have to go and beg anybody to be able to do. Just listen and do what you are told to do, examine what is on the table, understand it, and take the action, except they want to perish. Of course, it could be their choice that they want to perish. But I do not think that is their choice. It is between ignorance of the majority, the greed of the minority, and the general stupidity of those who think they are comfortable in their small corner. Let this deluge not come to meet everybody in the manner we can see from afar. It's heading speedily towards where nobody will be spared. I think enough said. Thank you for listening.
We appreciate your willingness to share your expertise with us. Your presentation was outstanding. We are grateful for your time. The floor is open for comments and questions. Please keep your questions or comments concise and relevant to the topic of the day, and also maintain a respectful tone. Kindly raise your hand or tap your mic twice and you'll be invited to speak. Any questions, any comments from the audience? Any question, any comments from the audience, please? Okay. In the absence of any question or comments, Mr. Yago, could you please provide a brief summary of the key takeaways? And we will appreciate your closing remarks too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I also want to thank spokesperson Tony Nabi for this comprehensive teaching today. The key takeaways are: one, the economic experts who know far more than Tinubu will know. The person of Konjo Iweala, Kingsley Moyelu, Eze Obi Kusili, and the rest have agreed that the constitution is a problem. None of them are mentioning the economy as the first thing. If these experts who know more than Buhari can accept that the actual problem with Nigeria, the foundational problem with Nigeria, is the constitution, why is Tinubu playing with Nigerians? Why is he playing with Nigerians? This issue has been tabled to him. We've heard his response, which shows in his body language and the response that he's not willing and ready to see to it that Nigeria moves forward. Two, everything will continue to get bad. In fact, it will go from bad to worse as long as this constitution remains there. I was also listening to a senator who, I can't remember his name now, who was asking I think it was on Channels TV, who was asking him, the presenter, was asking the presenter about the economy. And he said to him that, has anything changed? The problems remain. As a matter of fact, they continue to compound. No matter how much we try, no matter the president that is sitting there, the problem continues to compound. It doesn't go away. We're not able to solve it. Today, kidnapping has entered the show. Insecurity, the economy, everything stems from this constitution. And we will not, Nigerians will know that we will not be able to solve Nigeria's problem without addressing the constitution. It will never go away. As the spokesperson has said, that the hunger is just starting. We will never be able to solve it. Let us come to that agreement, to that realization that there is no other way forward than to work on this constitution. We are only delaying the doom by avoiding the rework of the constitution. We are only delaying it. It's upon us already. So the earlier we embrace this, the better for us. The immediate solution, number four, the immediate solution to Nigeria's problems is not focusing on the economy as Tinubu has taken to Emeka Anyoko and the Patriots. That is not the immediate solution, because this is where many people still get it wrong. When you talk about the constitution, they say, let us keep constitution aside first and see how we can stabilize the economy. That's the language they use before we begin to talk about constitution. But the only way to stabilize the economy is by reworking the constitution, because the constitution is the root cause of the economic problem. So therefore, reworking it is therefore the immediate solution. The constitution can be reworked by the explicit and well-detailed Nina's 5-point proposition. Looking at the way Nigeria is, I for one have seen it. It is the only workable plan. We've heard that of Emeka Anyoko. We've heard about other people. Even I've also looked at Kingsley Moyelu's template before now during the election, because he was also, campaigning for presidential position. No template comes close. Fair, just, with equity and equality as much as what Ninas has presented. It will literally solve all the problems on the go. So these are the points I want to itemize here that we've gotten from this teaching today. We should understand that the root cause of the problems we're having is the constitution. It is the immediate solution to Nigeria's problem. And there's no other way, there's no other approach by which our problems can be solved except with the commission this constitution. And Ninas has given us a template, a proposition to rework that constitution. I pray that we're able to look into this and Nigerians will listen in time before it gets out of hand. It's actually getting out of hand now. We just have to listen in time and start acting up so that we can fix these issues and look at how to build a nation moving forward. Thank you very much. That is the key points. And this point, I yield the mic.
Thank you very much for that. Mr. Nadi, we will appreciate your final thoughts before announcement. Mr. Nadi, please, we will appreciate your final thoughts before announcement.
Yeah, thank you. Nothing else to say than to thank those who came and who patiently. This is almost 8:30 now. That's an hour and a half, almost 10 minutes short of 1 hour and a half. And just to let us know that this matter will escalate suddenly. Just to let us know that we should get ready, do whatever we can to spread the information to more people. Because if we don't, their ignorance will increase the collateral damage exponentially. Ninas is not going to slow down for 1 minute to wait for those who may not know. It will just be a matter of maybe 1,000 human collateral damages in place of what should have been less than 10 if they listen. Let us hope that sanity will prevail sooner than later. Thank you. I yield the mic.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Justina, you are up next. Please proceed with the final announcement to wrap up today's Town Hall Club House section. You have the floor, Justina, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I want to say a very big thank you to everyone for making out time to come out for today's clubhouse meeting in spite of their busy schedules. These are the announcements of our activities through the week. For us to work effectively and efficiently, we'll be having joint clubhouse sections like this together at 7 p.m. Nigerian time on Tuesdays. And on Saturdays, we'll be having the Daughters of Truth on Facebook and YouTube at 5:30 p.m. Nigerian time. Please, we are all encouraged in the immediate task of massively disseminating Nina's project materials to all our people, and we're to sensitize them via the Nina's website, which is www.ninasvoice.org, and on YouTube, Nina's Voice on YouTube. We have over 400 videos, and we encourage to watch them and share widely. For further information, you can call the NINA Secretariat on 0912 9931 The second number is 090 At the count of 5, this clubhouse section will be shut down. The countdown begins. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Goodbye and God bless you.